Okay guys, hello and welcome to my first ever Unreal Engine 5 environment art tutorial. In today's video we are going to create this insane looking cyberpunk style nightly environment. We are going to place in buildings ourselves, we are going to go through the whole workflow. I'm going to show you how to set up the lighting, how to set up the cameras, and overall just have a good time. So make sure you subscribe and like the video if you like what I'm doing and want to see more like this or any other type of environment art tutorial. And without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay guys, as you can see, I opened up this empty project, and the first thing you actually going to want to do is create a new empty level. So we're gonna go up to file and then we're going to create a new empty level. Make sure you choose empty level. You create it, you wait for it to load up. After it has loaded, we are going to need a plane we can put our stuff on. So we are going to go into landscape mode and create a pretty basic landscape. It's the default one, you don't have to change these settings, they are good as they are. So after creating the landscape, you can close up the landscape tool. You can go and we can actually start, but before we start I included a ultra dynamic sky blueprint in the project files, so we're gonna put it in as a placeholder so we don't look at this black void. We actually have a sky. I'm just gonna wait for it to load up. Okay, as you can see, it has loaded up. Okay, so now we can actually start the blocking out of the level. This is the first step. You are going to create the first layer of buildings. Remember, we are going to have 3 layers of buildings, but before that we actually have to load these assets so they don't load when we are placing them. So press Ctrl A, then right click, go to asset actions and then press load. This is going to load all the assets you have selected. This is going to take a while, so I'm just going to skip that for you guys. Okay, once all your assets have been loaded, we are going to start the blockout phase. This is the phase where you get the general idea of how the scene is going to look. So I'm going to dock this layout and put it on my second monitor and start placing the buildings. I have my rough sketch opened on my second monitor, so I'm just going to place these buildings according to that. You can choose the buildings randomly, they all look incredibly good in my opinion, so choose random assets, choose random buildings, place them in. If you don't like them, just switch them out, switch it up, you know. Make sure you don't exactly copy mine, so you actually have something good. Yeah, I have a pretty hard time accepting these little mistakes. So you're just going to choose random buildings and block out your scene. I'm going to speed this part up for you guys so you don't have to wait for me to put all these buildings in. Yeah, as you can see, I have my engine scalability at medium. I'm sure this is not here for you guys if you just started up Unreal Engine, so you have to go to settings and you have to go to engine scalability settings, and you can set your scalability there, and then it will appear in the top left. Make sure you do this because having the engine scalability at a really high setting can actually make the engine lag quite a bit, so I recommend setting it to medium or high if your PC can handle high, but medium is pretty good, so I recommend medium. What I'm doing here right now is just lining up the end of the street with this plane, so it actually is in the same level. The street ends at the same spot on both sides. Okay, once you have your scene blocked out, we are going to go to the other folder, the Cyberpunk folder I included in the project file, and we are going to go to actors, and we are going to search for our buildings, our medium-sized buildings. They are actually called residential, so all of them are called residential, so you can just go ahead and type in the search bar residential, and it's going to show you all the residential buildings. And we are going to take these medium-sized buildings and start the second layer of our blockout. But before you do that, make sure you load the assets just as before, because as you can see, loading them one by one is taking a really long time. I actually forgot to load them, so make sure you go ahead and load all the residential building assets before you place them in. Okay, so as you may have noticed, our streaming pool size has been exhausted, so you are going to come here and type in r.streaming.poolsize, and this is going to ask for a value in megabytes. So if you put in 2048 like me, it is going to increase the texture streaming budget to 2 gigabytes, so this message displayed on the top left should be gone, and if it ever comes back, just increase the pool size again. I don't think there's a max value, so you can put anything you want, but if you don't do this, it's actually going to make these textures look awful, as you saw with those vents on the side of the building, so make sure you do that. Okay, now that we are finished with the medium-sized buildings, we are going to go to the large size buildings, our third layer of buildings. You can find it by typing in residential again, and the last 3 results are going to be your big buildings. As you can see, if I pull them in, they are pretty huge. As you can see, this right one is pretty huge. So our third and last blockout phase is placing these large buildings around. Make sure you get rid of all the gaps between the buildings, because that's going to look bad in the end result if you have gaps in the buildings that lead to these big empty spaces. Okay, as you can see, I am done with the block out of the scene, and you should be done by this point as well. So the next thing, as you can see, is going to be the road, because it's pretty ugly looking at this grid pattern. So the way I'm doing this road is by placing this plane on the ground and then importing a quixel texture for the road. You can play around with the size, make sure it covers the whole road. Make sure you don't have little gaps like this. Maybe this gap is fine. Maybe it's just me who doesn't like to see them. Okay, after you place your plane in the level, we are going to open up the fab library and wait for it to load up. And in the search bar, we are going to type in as you can see, I just searched for asphalt here. Make sure you put the price to 3, and then I just chose a random asphalt texture here so I can go to the quixel library. Make sure you choose materials and textures, and in here you can now search for asphalt. I don't know why this didn't come up with anything. Maybe just type in asp. Yeah, okay, just type in asp, and in the materials and textures section you are going to look for a material that is appealing to you. After you found something that is appealing to you, you can drag it on your plane and size it to fit in a, I don't know, maybe 5x5 plane. Yeah, 5x5 is right. So you are going to place these planes to make your road. Okay, as you can see, I am finished with the road, and this is actually the end of our placing things and making things look right phase, so you can actually go ahead and delete the ultra dynamic sky blueprint, because we are going to create our own sky by adding firstly a post-process volume. This is really important. This is going to make all difference in the end. Make sure you search for infinite and check infinite extent unbound. Okay, now we can add in the lights. So first of all, you are going to need a directional light. This is the sun of your scene, so to say. After that, you are going to need a skylight. You are going to need, in the volume section, I believe, a sky atmosphere and a fog. I actually forgot the name, so I'm going to search for fog, and yes, exponential height fog. You are going to need that. And before you do anything else, I like to group these actors together, so I'm just going to select all my buildings, move them to a folder, and I am going to name it buildings. I am going to do this with all the similar things in my scene. With the lighting, I am just going to create a new folder and call it lighting. And with the road planes, I am going to group them in a new folder and call it road. Okay, and one last thing for the lighting setup, we are going to make sure these settings are correct in the directional light. No, in the exponential height fog, you are going to check volumetric fog. This is going to make the fog volumetric. What a surprise. In the sky atmosphere, you are going to look for something I don't actually know. No, in the skylight, yes. You are going to tick real-time capture, so the light is captured in real time. And yes, in the directional light, actually, you are going to search for sun and make sure the atmospheric sunlight is turned on. So now we can start playing with the directional light. This is basically our sun, but before that we are going to come to the post-process volume, and in the exposure section change the metering mode to manual and choose a value that is good, that looks good for you. I don't know, maybe 8 is good for now. I'm sure I'm gonna change it after the sun's angle is changed. Actually, I'm going to change it now to 10, so I don't have to change it later. So if you press Ctrl L, you can actually play around with the sun's angle. I'm just going to make it like this, almost sunset. This after sunset, maybe there. This looks good. As you can see right there is the sun. Maybe a little lower, make it a bit more nighty feel. Yes, and as you can see, our exposure is pretty low right now, but changing the scalability settings actually going to make our scene look brighter, because more light is cast, more light is captured. I'm just going to make a quick save here, name my level Cyberpunk Street tutorial. You are going to find this in the project file as well, so you can look at this as a reference maybe. Okay, now I'm going to change the fog settings. So we have maybe this for 12, 13. Yeah, 13 is good for now. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the exponential height fog, and I'm going to change the light scattering color of the volumetric fog, so it gives us a more atmospheric vibe. As you can see, I'm coming here to in scattering color, and I'm going to look for like this purplish dark, really dark purplish color. As you can see, the sky's color has changed. Maybe this blue is better for this nighty feel. Really dark blue. Yeah, this is good for me. I'm going to change this as well to almost the same color, and the in scattering texture tint, no, I'm not going to change that because we don't have a texture. Fog opacity, you can play with that, but that's not doing anything to our scene right now because it's so small. Fog intensity, you can increase that, as you can see, but our little scene is not big enough to capture this fog. Yeah, I think this is alright. So we can come here to sky atmosphere and the Rayleigh scattering, which is the sun rays being scattered in the atmosphere. We can change that to this really dark navy blue. As you can see, the sky atmosphere has changed to this really dark blue color. Going through our scene to look for any artifacts or weird things. I don't see any. So in the skylight you can change the light color. This isn't going to do much, but these small things make all the difference. You can play around with these values all you want. As you can see, I'm going to change this exposure to a little smaller, because if you set the scalability to cinematic, which is going to be the engine setting you are going to use when rendering the scene, you have to look at it in the cinematic scalability to get a real sense of what's going on. Bloom is a really good thing. I really like it. The method should be standard. As you can see, the bloom is taking effect here. It's pretty intense. Maybe I'm going to lower the threshold a bit, or maybe minus 0.5 is good. Yeah, this is good. Like I mentioned before, you can play around with these values. You can experiment with them. Make sure you experiment with them, actually, because this is what's going to make your scene look unique, aside from the building layout, of course. But the lighting is a really important thing, I think, when making these cyberpunk-esque scenes. We have to place a really big emphasis on lights. Okay, I think this looks great. So now we can actually start setting the lighting of our scene, because while all these really shiny neon signs look great, our scene actually lacks pretty much any light coming from other sources. So we are going to place some lights around things that should be lit up. As you can see, I placed a point light in this, I don't know what this is, ticket machine, or I don't know. But make sure you place lights where neon signs or screens are, because those are the things that are going to emit light in real life as well. So I'm going to place rectangular light here coming off this sign and changing the color of it. Yeah, if it doesn't fit your asset in its original size, you can change its source width and source height to make it wider and taller. Make sure you match the height, the size of the asset you are trying to light up. I'm going to make this little bit tilting forward and then changing the light with the eyedrop tool. You can choose the light of the object you are trying to make emit light. So I'm just going to go around the scene and look at what should be lit up in real life, and I'm going to place lights on them. This rectangular light here. Oh, before we go any further, I forgot to mention, you have to set these lights mobilities to static, because if you have too much stationary or movable lights in your scene, they are not going to work. So make sure all the lights placed in the level are set to static, because we are making a render, we are not making a game. In a game you maybe want to consider movable or stationary lights, because they can capture light in real time, but we are going to make a render here, not a game, so having these on static is absolutely fine. These are going to be baked lights, I think. I am not really familiar with the technical side of the Unreal Engine lighting system. I just know that stationary lights are not captured in real time, so it's completely fine when making a render like this. Okay, after you are done with setting up the lighting of your level, we are going to change something with the road actually. So you can go ahead and open up the material instance for the road, and you can go into the, not the normal, the ORM, yes. I don't know what that means, but you have to go there, and we are going to change the roughness values around a bit, because the more rough an object is, surprisingly the less light is gonna reflect, and I want to make this road look really wet, so a small roughness value is what I'm looking for. Maybe not this wet, because this is almost like a mirror. 0.1 maybe. Make sure you experiment with these values, because you never know what's going to look good. You can experiment with these values all you want. Yeah, I'm maybe going to change this road around a bit, but for now it's okay. Make sure you look at the scene in cinematic mode, because that's how it's going to look in the end. make sure you group the lighting so your project doesn't look like a mess. Okay, and now starts the part which is arguably the most important part of the project or the environment setup. You are going to go to the post-process volume and just play around with the values, really. Like change around the bloom. I would need lots smaller than 3, maybe 2. That's not a lot smaller actually. Going back to -1 here. This looks so much better, I think. Change the exposure to 10. Maybe 11. Yeah, 11 is good. Looks really good. And I like to play around with these values. They can make your scene look so incredible. They are so important. Yeah, this lens flare this looks really good. Yes, I'm going to change this to 0.1 maybe. This is too small. 0.5. Yeah, 0.5 is good. Is good. And depth of field, we don't need that. Color grading. Now this is a really important step in my opinion. Just as the others, you have these 3, I don't know, categories: shadows, midtones, and the highlights. Just go ham on this. Go ham on these values. Changing them around, you know, the shadows. Changing this value is going to make the shadows a different color. So I want this really cold feeling to this environment, so I'm going to change the shadows to this bluish tint. Changing the highlights now. Maybe this can look colder with the changing the values. Yeah, so like I mentioned, play around, have fun. This is all about having fun, creating something. There is no right answer. There is no tutorial that's going to teach you how to do it correctly. This is something you and only you can decide how it would look. So yeah, play around with the values, and I'm going to get back to you when I find the correct one for me.
I've been driving through the clouds, just wanna see your face, waiting for the sun to come out. I've been driving through the clouds, waiting for
Okay, so now we have come to the final phase of this tutorial, which is actually setting up your cameras and setting up the shots that you are going to take of the scene you have created. So drag in a few of these cine camera actors and place them around. Place them in places you want to look your scene at from, and just choose the most beautiful shots you can. Yes, maybe going from the back here to the front. No, this. Yeah, from this corner we can take a shot at this kiosk or I don't know what that is. Yes, this looks good with the bike in the foreground being out of focus, and maybe place another camera actor in the scene just so you have a little something else. From here, maybe from the other side. Yes, from here I think this is good. Okay, after you're done with that, we are going to place our level sequence. You are going to come here, come to cinematic, and place your level sequence. You can place this anywhere, it literally doesn't matter. You are going to come here to the level sequence asset and create a new level sequence. You are going to name this whatever you want. I'm going to name it tutorial shot. You can find this in the project file as well for reference, and you are going to open the level sequence. Now here you can see the timeline of your scene. This is where the editing happens. Just select the two cameras in the outliner and drag them in. And if you have used any editing software ever, I think you are going to be pretty familiar with this layout. So you have your timeline, you have your cuts, and you have your channels. I don't know what to call them, but yes, you are going to set this up, edit it the way you want. You don't need much editing really for this rendering. You can just have the basics set up, because much of the editing is going to be done in an editing software. So just have the two shots, lay them out. Maybe you can use keyframes to move the cameras. That could look really good if you have some movement and not just stationary cameras looking at stuff.
Waiting for the sun to come out. Just wanna see your face. Wanna see your face. 'Cause it's the only
Okay, I am done with editing the scene, so it's time for the final phase, the rendering. You are going to save the sequencer or the sequence you have created, and then press this button here to bring out the render movie settings. Here you can choose your settings, like the resolution, the frame rate, the file type you want to be rendering to. As you can see, I'm just showing you all the settings, but you can look at them for yourself as well if you are creating this. So I'm going to choose .avi, which is a video sequence, and you don't need the audio because we haven't done any audio in this tutorial. The texture streaming setting is something you can tick, but it's going to make the render longer, I think. As I said before, I'm not really into the technical side of the engine, but maybe I can research it and make a tutorial for you guys on the technical side. Here is the output folder. You can play around with them, and here in the cinematic section you must tick cinematic mode to make it render in the cinematic engine scalability, so it looks the absolute best. And yes, here's the compression, which I don't use. I have a pretty beefy PC, so I don't use the compression. I compress the video afterwards in an editing software, because these files are going to be huge, and I mean huge. I have a 1 minute and 20 second video that is 146 gigabytes. So make sure the settings are correct, and after you are happy with your settings, just press render. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching my first tutorial here on YouTube. I really appreciate you watching this video, and if you made it until the end, make sure you go into the description. The first link, you are going to find the project file. You are going to find all the assets used in this video, all the tutorial levels, all the tutorial sequences, so you are going to have something to look at as a reference. Again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you making it this far, and as always, have a nice one.